Hello and a warm welcome to Doing Business in Rwanda. My name is Stephen Movunyi. Now, the government has reviewed the procedures to obtain construction permits for small-scale building projects in terms of time and cost. This is especially expected to benefit small and medium enterprises, which constitute the biggest percentage of Rwanda's private sector. Stick around for more on that. In the recent years, Rwanda made various reforms across different sectors that led to the country's current rank of the 29th easiest place to do business globally. In the construction sector, for instance, the country had put in place measures that aimed to make the construction process seamless and safe. In the latest reforms, the procedures to obtain construction permits for small-scale building projects have been reviewed, both time and cost-wise.
What we focused on previously was how do we improve the quality of regulations, in terms of building construction. And so a lot was done to understand and to put in place measures for, what kind of professionals have to be licensed and certified in order to check the quality of buildings, what type of mandatory inspections need to be in place before, during, and after construction, really to just make sure that our buildings are sound, they're safe, they meet international standards of quality. So that was the focus, and we actually have seen a lot of benefit coming from that. Right now, Rwanda scores out of the 15 points for quality, we score 14, which is almost a perfect score. Now, where the focus is really remaining is to understand for an SME, right, which is trying to construct a project, a building project, a simple case of a warehouse for simple storage, for instance. What we've noticed is that the requirements for those type of projects are almost similar to those for a large-scale, construction project. And the focus for the World Bank and for Rwanda as well, given the setup of our private sector, is the experience of SMEs. And so we realized that these procedures had to be categorized. We had to categorize our buildings, the different construction projects, understand what is a complex project and what are the requirements for that versus what is a less complex project, a small-scale project, and what are the requirements.
Previous orders were saying that every category of building should need so and so, without specifying if all these categories having the same complexities. So we say this cannot continue to be the same. We categorize buildings depending on its complexity. We have seen that we need to reduce the procedures that an investor, an entrepreneur used to come to get a construction permit. Previously, it was 15. The World Bank was counting 15 procedures. Now we streamlined these procedures, and it's now close to 7 procedures, from 15 to 7. Another thing we did is actually reducing substantially the cost of getting a construction permit. Remember, they are all things that are attached to the ministerial orders, to the regulatory frameworks. So who have amended the building code, who have amended the ministerial orders, so that we remove all unnecessary requirements to get a construction permit. There is what we do in practice and what is written in the law. So what is written in the law is actually counting more, is actually having more weight. So when the World Bank is assessing us and it finds something is not doing in practice, but it is written in the law, it's going to be counted as a procedure. So we said it's better to harmonize what we are doing in practice and what is written in the law.
Streamlining construction for small-scale projects necessitated elimination of burdensome procedures involved in getting construction permits. To put this into context, these procedures would cost over 10% of the value of such projects.
We made sure that we streamlined the requirements for small-scale, less complex projects, which is really what SMEs are in the business of. And so for those, we've made sure that we remove very costly, cumbersome procedures, such as requirements for geotechnical studies, those are, soil tests and so on, requirements for environmental impact assessments, topographic surveys, all of which came up to a cost of over 3 million Rwandan francs, a very significant significant, portion of the value of the building which you're looking at for an SME, which is around, 30 million or so. So over 10% of the cost for building these simple projects was going into procedures and requirements that a government entity was looking at. So we've made sure that those are eliminated to continue as much as possible to make it easy for SMEs to operate and to do business in Rwanda.
Doing business normally here in Rwanda, the biggest sector that is moving faster is construction. So construction sector, in order to do it well, you need to have a construction permit. And we have found out that there are some challenges that have been being met by the people who are in that industry. So we have worked together with the different partners to see how we can make some reforms so that we minimize those challenges or we eliminate some of them.
The reforms are specifically beneficial to small and medium enterprises. For one to understand this, one has to know that Rwandan SMEs comprise over 90% of the private sector and account for 40% of private sector employment.
It appeared that the requirements for all projects were almost the same, whether it is, as the presentation was saying, a warehouse, which is supposed to be done in 30 days. It requires the same time and process like it would take you to do a multi-story building. So the multi-story building remains with the process that are required, which is actually needful because of the complexity of the project. But this small project, a bungalow you're doing for a client, a warehouse, some of the projects are really fast, don't have to go through those processes. So the reduction benefits small projects mainly, which is good for us because, as I say, at the end of the day, they are the majority. We have a few major projects, but most of the time the architect is engaged in doing residential houses. You're engaged in helping a company set out a warehouse or maybe do a temporary tent somewhere for an event. So the reduction of those processes for those low risk rather projects is good for us. And I think it's going to go in a long way in reducing the difficulty that was there for doing those projects.
Actors in the construction sector welcomed the reforms, which they believe will trigger substantial improvements.
This review that was launched was a result of solving some of the identified bottlenecks, which was among them so many steps, and some of them seemed not to be relevant. They realized some of them create like unnecessary delays or even repetition of what could have been done by others. And we therefore appreciated because the steps were brought from the number which was there before to the current number that was agreed. And we believe it's going to create that improvement desired.
It's a very positive development from the side of consultants because they'll benefit us. Anything that helps us reduce the time that we take to get our permits is a positive thing to us. So by extension, it might help the country to rank higher than it has, but the beneficiaries will be mainly us and the clients we work for. So, and the main reforms actually seem to have been more of a tweak of removing unnecessary processes that have been in the system and then streamlining it, because there's no major changes that have been done according to the presentation, but removing there are those unnecessary elements which have been put away and adding others that probably bring our profession and practice into date, update it rather.
It is going to create the value for money. There are times if bureaucracies are many, you find that someone is unnecessarily delaying or someone is unnecessarily being charged because of unnecessary processes. These reviews are going to cut the cost and bring the cost of doing business down.
Improved communication between authorities and professionals would enhance not only construction procedures, but also doing business at large.
Some of the challenges we have are purely related to information breakdown, because sometimes you find that the information about decisions that have been made by the city does not trickle to the professionals, which is a challenge. You could find some minor adjustment, a minor update, but sometimes it gets missed. So you find that that breakdown is something that can be improved. The city can do better liaison with the professionals, keep us in touch with any challenges they have. Sometimes they do have challenges, for example, with the BPMIS system, which is the system for online approval, but they can be upfront. They communicate to architects, tell us we have this challenge with the system, we are upgrading, or maybe sometimes they are supplementary, what do you call the supplementary decisions that are made in line, just like the ministerial orders. So the way they are communicated for me is something that I think the city can enhance to ensure that the flow is seamless. We also need to look at the life cycle of the project, because permitting is just the start. What about renewing the permit after some years? What about the challenges within the development? We highlighted, for example, there are some decisions that can be made that affect the project along the way, which the investor can be notified in advance before even the time for renewal of permit comes, so that they don't slow the renewal of permit. Because, for example, if you had been approved with a small road, the government is increasing that road, it will affect the way your project would be implemented. Sometimes that decision of increasing the road might not be affected in the ground, but the city will already know that we're actually going to increase that road. So it can communicate back to the architects, because it has their contacts, it has their record, and tell them, look, we're going to modify this, we're going to make it bigger. Can you adjust your project to work out with this new development? And so that the time you ask for renewal, it doesn't take long.
While Rwanda has attained its highest ranking with regards to doing business, unnecessary procedures in getting construction permits are one of the constraints that have to some extent been impeding investment. Now that they are no more, the country is expected to be even more attractive to investors.
The end game is not the score itself, it's not the rank itself, but it's a very, what we've noticed is it's a very excellent guiding tool for us to benchmark. But it also is a very important signaling tool for investments and for investors into the attractiveness of a country as an investment destination. That said, construction permits, this indicator is one where we are ranked quite low. In terms of the ranking, we're 106th globally, and so obviously it presents a very significant potential for us to improve our attractiveness and the ease of doing business in Rwanda if we continue to streamline the requirements and the environment within which people can obtain construction permits.
And Kanyonga's remarks bring us to the end of today's Doing Business in Rwanda. Remember to send your feedback on email at dbirwa@abn360.com or on Twitter at dbirwanda or myself at Stephen Muvunyi.